It's 81 years ago this week that the Soviet Red Army liberated the Nazis' Auschwitz concentration camp. In that camp alone, Adolf Hitler's regime systematically killed more than 1 million people during the Second World War. Germany's Nazi past is very present in a lot of discussions today. You'll hear the slogan "Never Again" in the streets, and members of the Jewish community say they don't feel safe anymore. Here in Germany, as well as in the US. So today on Berlin Briefing, we'll discuss how 81 years on, Holocaust Remembrance is no ritual, it's a warning. And I'm so glad that Ines Pohl, our Washington bureau chief, is here again today. Hello, Ines, great to see you early in the morning there, as well as Michaela Küfner here, our chief political editor and my podcast host. And we have Shani Rozanes here, and you are DW's Middle East expert, and you know a lot about anti-Semitism debates around the world. So very, very glad that you're here in the studio. So, hello, everyone. The German Parliament had a ceremony this week for Holocaust Remembrance Day. And that is something that they have been commemorating for 30-odd years, every year, around the 27th of January, the day that the Auschwitz camp was liberated in 1945. A survivor spoke, Tova Friedman from the US, and let's first of all hear what she told German lawmakers.
Now, 81 years later, much of the world has turned against us. I walked out of Auschwitz thinking I'll never have to be afraid again to be Jewish, never again. But here we are. This is exactly how it began right here in the 30s. It just began just like that. Anti-Semitism has not disappeared. It has adapted. It now is often disguised in a new anti-Zionist language, spreading with alarming speed through social media, and finds acceptance in spaces that should stand for critical thinking and moral clarity, like universities and other academic institutions.
So, Shani, Tova Friedman is a TikTok star. Her grandson started that channel. And of course, you know, when you listen to Tova Friedman, it's very powerful, coming from somebody who actually lived through this. So this is the question: how do you pass on those warning signs? How to recognize a fascist system when you're beginning to live through one to future generations, when that generation of people who actually experienced the Nazi atrocities is dying out?
Well, I don't think we need them. And I think, you know, the dangers of fascism are not just for Jews or minorities in general. They're for the general public. I think nobody in Germany wants to see that era coming back. And we have been, in a way, you know, you see her and you see her struggle and you see her success and you see how she built her life and you see her very defiant, very emotional also speech that she gave yesterday, but that at the same time, she's not the first. You yourself have said, you know, this kind of ceremony has been taking place in the German parliament for 30 years now. These warning signs and these warning, messages are constantly there. So I don't think it's about, you know, we're not depending on the Holocaust to learn lessons. There's something deeper in our societies, German, but not only, where we're failing to get the message, and we're failing to get the right, you know, conclusion drawn from that time in history. That we're faced with, you know, talking about the survivors themselves. Are about 200,000 still left alive. Of course, fewer and fewer of them will be remaining with the years. Most of them who are survivors were kids, so they're also memory and understanding of the historic context of political context of things when they were 5 or 6, when everything happened, is also very limited. I think we need to think about our challenges as a society of the patterns that we're falling into that connects to dehumanization, to racism. It starts with racism and bias against anybody that is not us. And this is about, you know, creating the border between us and them. And I think, you know, there's among the Jewish community. I'm a member of the Jewish community. I'm Israeli by origin. There's always, you know, we're always conflicted about these kind of days, because on the one hand, you'd rather have them than not have them. You want to have the message resonating. You want to, you know, there's something somewhat comforting in knowing there's one day that is dedicated to that of the year. But then a lot of time you feel like this is lip service. And we've been in this place again and again, and we're there every year. And still we see, for example, in Germany, anti-democratic parties gaining stronger and stronger support among the general public. So, yeah, we'd rather have this day than not have it. But if it's all about this day, then it's not enough.
Julia Klöckner, the president of the parliament, also gave an address to parliament, Michaela. And, if you can just describe why there's a speech by Tova Friedman felt so topical at the moment. Anti-Semitic incidents are on the rise. So if you can just give us a background at the moment of how we're celebrating or how we're commemorating Holocaust Remembrance Day this year and why it feels like it's not a ritual. It's something that is actually very, very validly remembered.
Well, first of all, the bigger picture is that democracies are under pressure. And I think Tova Friedman, something that really struck me is that she said that she lived through ordinary people committing extraordinary crimes. And we're talking about ordinary people, not talking about the academic debate here, who feel that this history can be pushed away, that really it doesn't have anything to do with them. And here Julia Klöckner was very clear, not just citing the German Constitution, which, born out of the experience of the Holocaust, has as its first article that human dignity is inviolable. That is paramount to anyone living in Germany. And she clearly was also sending that message to people with migratory background that if this is going to be your country, I'm paraphrasing now, then the history of this country is also yours. Yeah.
Let's hear from Julia Klöckner herself.
Hatred is becoming socially acceptable. Even children are learning it. And a few weeks after the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, the Anne Frank Educational Center surveyed school children in Hessen to find out their opinions. An 11-year-old girl said, and I quote, "I think it's a shame when Palestinian children die, but I don't care about the Jews." Children don't talk like that on their own. They are influenced by adults. Those who live in Germany enjoy the freedom and protection afforded by the Basic Law. Those who hold a German passport, whether by birth or naturalization, must respect the framework of this order. This is not a suggestion of goodwill. It is a categorical imperative.
So, Julia Klöckner, in 5 situations in her speech, addressed the danger that people who are coming to Germany don't necessarily understand the importance of protecting Jewish life. I found that very striking, Michaela. That's not once did she mention the threat coming from right-wing extremism, which authorities say is still the biggest danger and the biggest anti-democratic movement, and very specifically also a threat to Jewish people, to the Jewish community here. Shani, what did you make of Julia Klöckner?
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's these are very slight but very clear hints to the idea of the imported anti-Semitism into Germany, which is something that the right likes to cling onto. And of course, we are talking about the history of Germany. I think Germany has taught the world many lessons about anti-Semitism. The idea that this is an imported, notion, that Germany has rinsed itself from all of its anti-Semitic, past, and now it's being brought by immigrants. That's again, we're talking about the very rhetoric that brought us to the Holocaust, and we're replicating that by trying to warn against it, by again pushing, looking into other migrants, looking into other minority communities, and again failing for Germans, ordinary people, as Michaela was saying, taking responsibility for their political decisions and their neighbors next door and what they're voting for and what their lives are looking for. So I'm again. Another sign of the alarming trends we're seeing growing in Germany.
I mean, studies show that both is true, that the homegrown anti-Semitism is there, and that's still the largest proportion. But at the same time, there also is an issue of people coming from mindsets that are where children are raised in not just being critical of Jews, but in where anti-Semitism isn't really defined. Even it's not given a definition.
Agree with you.
So it's both is true, but it's very interesting that she focused on the migrant community.
I mean, that's what I find interesting. That if you're the president of the German Parliament, then you are very aware. If you leave out this one factor entirely, then you're sending a very clear message. In 5 situations, you mention imported anti-Semitism and the risks. And not once do you quote the authorities, your own authorities that collect all the numbers from all the official institutions that try and be independent observers of what is really going on in this country. So, she didn't try to paint the whole picture.
I think it's also a very easy solution. I do agree with you. There's no doubt it's coming from both sides. There is a very big problem with migration community. I live in a neighborhood in Berlin that has many migrants in it. I experience that every day. I have that fear when I send my kid to the public school in Germany every day. I have come home since October 7th more than once to see not just slogans that are pro-Palestinians, but actually clearly anti-Semitic slogans like Jews are kids murderers and swastikas on my house door. I know that firsthand. Anti-Semitism is very alive and it's coming from too many directions at us. But then at the same time, again, we're talking about the political actors in this house, and something else that Tova Friedman said, you are these people in this house. This is your responsibility. You need to take more action. And this is about failing to acknowledge and take that. And you add to that the erosion you see de facto in the Brandmauer, and in the what we're calling the wall, the firewall between, working with the AfD and you see that erosion. You see that how it's slowly falling. It's no longer a big deal because it's just been normalized. And this is where I'm concerned about where the political discourse is. The reality on the ground, that's very alarming. And I do agree, it's coming also from that side. But I expect more from people who sit in power to be more candid and more bold in their ability to take this topic and tackle that.
How difficult is that for the Conservatives, for Friedrich Merz's CDU party to address all of these problems at the same time when they're under threat from the far-right AfD, who have it so much easier to just say, okay, look, we didn't have these problems when all of these people weren't in our country, so let's just deport them.
Well, they've accepted the challenge that the political race really is between the conservative CDU-CSU bloc and the far-right Alternative for Germany, which is on the record of having reduced or belittled any kind of commemoration in Germany. We have one of the co-founders talking about this episode in German history just being a bird's dropping. It's a very old quote, but we saw Björn Höcke, the leading figure in Thuringia and one of the key leading figures, informally actually, within the party, speaking of a monument of shame, which he still claims that he was misunderstood. But this is where politicians choose to be very precise in Germany, no matter which side they are on. So they've accepted that as a challenge, but they're trying to get voters back from the far right. So there's nothing for them to gain there. At the same time, we see the Conservatives signing up to those calls for more civil courage. We heard that from the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, a social democrat, but he's supposed to be above politics. But also from the president of the Central Council of Jews, Schuster, here in Germany, who recently was at a CSU, the Bavarian Conservative gathering, once again stressing that he cannot imagine Jewish life in Germany being viable if the far-right Alternative for Germany comes to power. So clearly a condemnation of the AfD getting anywhere into a position of power. And we may well see this happen come September in the state of Saxony-Anhalt.
And Shani, we want to bring Ines back in because Ines has been working on a report about Jewish people in the US who are now saying that they're feeling that their lives are somehow not as safe anymore. And some of them are choosing to reclaim, in most cases, the German passport. So if we're talking about the fact that Germany is considered to be a somewhat less safe country now for Jewish people here, what's your reaction to that discussion in the US?
Well, I just have to say, we've also heard last week, for example, there were reports that Trump is considering to give asylum to British Jews who want to immigrate to the States. One thing that is really a big pity, I find, is the way the topic of anti-Semitism has been weaponized by both sides to prove their political agenda. Nobody is gaining from that, and Jews don't feel safer from that, from Australia to the US to Europe. This is the problem, this weaponization. And Trump wants to make a point, about being such a big friend of Israel without really actually addressing the real problems that are there for Jews in the States. Let's just put that on the table as well.
Yeah, okay. So let's just watch the beginning of Ines's report.
Ruth Greenthal is 103 years old and one of the oldest Holocaust survivors who just got her German passport back. The Nazi regime took away her German citizenship because she's Jewish. She started the process when it looked like Trump was likely to win a second time.
And really evoked feelings that I thought I would never, in my lifetime, I would not have to deal with this again.
Do you think Donald Trump is anti-Semitic?
Basically, yes. It's hard to know he's anti whatever is not good for him. He will use anti-Semitism. He has his family has a long history of housing discrimination against anyone of color. And Jews as well, I'm sure. I think he thinks the Jews are black.
So Ines' first question, how on earth is she 103? What's her secret? Did she tell you?
I think her secret is that she never gave in. She always kind of pushes herself into places which are challenging. That's amazing. The details she remembers, the way she could talk about the French internment camp Gurs, where she spent some time with her aunt, the lack of food, how it felt when they crossed the border into Spain and then Portugal on their way to the United States, and also, how she finally kind of came back to life when they were on this ship which brought them to the United States. So she's just an amazing woman, and I'm really thankful that she opened her door quite literally to us to share her experience with DW and our audience.
But Shani just said that Donald Trump, publicly says he's a friend of Israel. So why is she saying that she's skeptical that he's there to protect Jewish life?
It's not only her. So I picked her kind of as my main protagonist in the story because she has this vivid memory, because she's born in 1922. She's definitely one of the oldest Holocaust survivor who can talk so detailed about this time. But I also talked to many younger Jewish Americans who want this option B, this plan B, to be able to leave the countries. The figures alone in New York kind of double pretty much every year since Donald Trump was elected the first time. Why does she want this passport? Why do other Jews think they might need this option to leave the United States? Shani kind of mentioned that a little bit as well. Of course, Donald Trump supports Israel. He supports Netanyahu's Israel, but not because he wants to support Jews or Jewish lives, because he wants to make business. He wants to make deals with Israel. This is his whole approach. He never stands up really when it comes to anti-Semitism. Maybe some of our viewers remember this demonstration in Charlottesville that was just look at my paper to get it right here, 2017. Some white supremacists chanted their Jews will not replace us. And Donald Trump afterwards said, well, both sides said some right things. So the demonstrators, but also the nationalists, the racists. So that's his approach. He never really takes a clear stand to support Jews. And what Jewish Americans, what many Americans fear here, of course, is that authoritarianism will take over. And that's, Shani, what you said. His politics, this whole thing, let's make America great again, is really let's make America white again. And he uses this us against them with pretty much everything. And of course, many Jews feel like they are them. They are the others. They are those who will be kicked out first, will be threatened first if this kind of development into an even more authoritarian state will deepen.
If I can also add to that, we saw an arson of a synagogue in Mississippi 2 weeks ago. This is a place that was also under attack by the Ku Klux Klan back in the 60s because those Jews were supporters of the civil rights movement and for equal rights for blacks. And what we also heard in the protagonist that Ines has brought, many Jews, but mostly in America, are very liberal. And they feel that these, the steps that are taken by the government. And we've also seen, we see here, this is why I'm being very, when you're cuddling to the extreme right, when you are, it doesn't matter if you are pro-Israel or not. I find it to be somewhat of an artificial division. I am pro-Israel, but at the same time, I am, I'm against anti-Semitism. It always connects in the sense that when you are flaming, you are fanning the flames of nationalism, of authoritarianism, of authoritarian regimes and ideas, you're by default making all minorities and Jews included. You're pushing them to the margins, and the next step can be violent, and the next step can lead to catastrophes, as we have seen before. So. I know there's also the fear for Jews. Antisemitism is real, and it's growing, and it's coming from many directions. And the idea also on the other hand, on the left, of the ability to create a clear distinction between being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist versus being anti-Semitism. This is also an artificial division that many Jews, more in the conservative right, but many around the world, in Germany too, feel is also bound to fail, because eventually what we're seeing is the way Jews see it is there's new excuses, there's always new manifestations to the basic hate for Jews. And sometimes there's more political pretext, sometimes there's more, other agendas. But the fact is that we as Jews, unfortunately, are used to fear, are used to living in the fear, and we have those very highly sensitive radars that we have developed throughout the centuries to recognize danger when it's coming. And I'm hearing the alarms ringing from all over.
And I think this is very striking as well, that you speak to people from various communities, Jewish communities, who recognize patterns of behavior. And it was very striking in your report, Ines, which we're definitely going to drop the link just below here to look at the whole report. You were interviewing people picking up their German passports in New York from the Jewish community there, who felt certain that, first it's people of color, it's Mexicans, but that Jews, in the end, it will be the Jews as well. And I spoke to a Holocaust survivor at Auschwitz at a commemoration there. That's a couple of years ago. And she said, look, you better watch out, because, they come to the Jews. If they go for the Jews, there's always something else behind it. There's a lot more behind it. And in the end, it's about undermining democracy. It's about mobs in the streets arresting people. And American Jews are clearly recognizing that pattern of behavior, while, of course, you cannot compare what is happening in the United States with what happened in Germany, 1945, but they have a very fine sense of this is how it starts. And we're hearing that from so many of those survivors.
And it is, if I might jump in here, sure. And it is, it is happening here. As we were speaking last night, there was another incident in Brooklyn where a car drove into a synagogue. It's expected to be a hate crime. They're just looking at it. Thankfully, nobody got killed. But anti-Semitic violence is sharply on the rise here in the United States. And of course, Jews experience that every day, as Shani just was talking about her fear regarding her kid and her own kind of well-being in parts of Berlin. This is true in many parts here in the United States. But I think it's also important to mention here, because it sounds maybe in a way unthinkable that those who had to flee Germany, who lost so many family members in the Holocaust in this country, want to be able to go back to Germany. The German passport is also a European passport. And that's also what Mani said, especially the younger kids. They said, I have the right because my family members suffered or even got killed during the Holocaust. Therefore, I have the right to get a German passport. I wouldn't be able to get a British passport or a French passport. But with a German passport, I can go to Europe. I can study in France. I can work in Spain. So this definitely also plays a part. And in a way that made me really happy when I talked to these younger people at the embassy, that they really see Germany so much as a part of Europe. You know, we sometimes, I think, forget this in this debate because it's getting so complicated in many ways with Europe and the European Union these days. But you know, from the outside, we are, at least from the United States, we are seen as one big opportunity, Europe, and that definitely plays a part in this kind of spike of people who want a German passport.
And it's part of that restoration law, right, Ines, that Germany has that makes it so special. You just mentioned it. It's essentially a contract as part of Germany's recognition to apologize and to try and give something back to the survivors of the Holocaust, that citizenship can be granted no matter how long you haven't lived in this country.
Yes, right. And until now, it's like until 2031, you can kind of reclaim a German passport. It's like, of course, for the survivors, the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren. So that's a pretty long family line, so to speak.
We've also seen it, by the way, in places like Portugal and Spain in recent years. This option has already closed, and Jews were following that. I just want to say one word before we're finishing. Antisemitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a problem for anybody who cherishes democracy and democratic values. And this is the biggest frustration I think we have, is that we feel like this is a debate about us and for us without making it clear for the wider audience to understand, the wider public, that this is just a sign for where we are heading and how big the danger is for everybody.
Thank you, Shani. And I think we've got a last soundbite from Tova Friedman, from the Holocaust survivor, who addressed German lawmakers with a very similar message. And we'll just let her finish this show for today. And I thank you very much for watching. I am looking forward to your comments, to join our debate. And of course, subscribe to this show. Find Ines's report in the show notes and do come back for more next week. But now, Tova Friedman.
The younger generations are not responsible for what happened, for what their ancestors did in Treblinka, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Majdanek, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, and other Nazi camps. But they are not responsible, but you, who are in a position of such leadership, are responsible for shaping the world. Not only for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren, and for mine. And that means taking this pestilence, this epidemic, this hatred, this anti-Semitism very, very seriously. Neutrality in the face of hatred is not neutrality, it is permission.